Okay, so today is March 6th. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm very excited to talk about Executive Order 13848, as well as to get to talk about the Kraken, because I really enjoy talking about both of these things. But it's difficult. A lot of people don't know about either one of these two things because they're so heavily censored online. And I have to be very careful in this video not to break any YouTube rules. I'm not going to claim there's any fraud in the election. I'm not going to claim the election was stolen. And I'm not going to show any evidence of fraud. So YouTube should not have a problem with this video. So I'll be very careful. But I'm just going to run through a timeline of the executive order and then run through a timeline of the Kraken and tell you exactly what it was and what it will be coming out. Not when it will be, but what exactly it is. So first things first, Executive Order 13848 was signed by Donald Trump on September 12th, 2018. And we are just going to breeze through this, and we're only going to spend like 30 seconds on it. You can see the executive order is imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in U.S. elections. Again, I'm not claiming there was foreign interference. I'm just going to explain the executive order. Donald J. Trump is the one who gave us this. And it says not later than 45 days after the conclusion of the United States election. So 45 days is very important. Within 45 days, Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, puts together an assessment. They compile all the evidence of things that may or may not have happened around Election Day. That's the first deadline, is 45 days. We'll come back to that deadline. I'll show you what happened on day 45 last year. Within 45 days of receiving the assessment, so within 45 days of this day when they do the assessment. So within 45 days of receiving the assessment, basically they compile all the information and deliver it specifically to the President, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense. And then from this date, which is now 90 days after the election, we come to our third date, which is 30 days after that. And at this point, anyone who is involved, their property or interest in property, their assets are now blocked, may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, otherwise dealt in. I think I'm understanding this correctly. Feel free to critique me. I don't claim to be an expert on this executive order, but I definitely understand it a lot better than anybody who has read it only 0 times. So we'll go back to our timeline. June 22nd, 2020. So before the election, this is the summer before the presidential election, Trump announces online that he expects that there might be some foreign interference in the election. This is what he said. I took this screenshot. And I'm not claiming there's any foreign interference. I'm just saying, I'm going to quote what the president said at the time. Rigged 2020 election. Millions of mail-in ballots will be printed by foreign countries and others. It will be the scandal of our times. June 22nd, 2020. Back to our timeline. We now get to November 3rd, 2020, and we had a perfectly normal election. Okay, so now we get to the first date in the executive order. So remember, the election day was November 3rd. 45 days from election day is the first deadline. And what's important is not only is this the deadline to put together the assessment or the elections intel briefing, but the Trump administration actually announced that they're implementing the executive order, and everybody seemed to miss it. Here it is. So the Secretary of State and Secretary of Treasury, and this is, again, the executive order on foreign interference in our elections, 45 days, 45 days, 30 days. In there it says, the Secretary of State and Secretary of Treasury, in consultation with the heads of other appropriate agencies, shall jointly prepare a recommendation for the president. Yeah, that's who these guys are. Mike Pompeo was the Secretary of State, Steve Mnuchin, Secretary of Treasury, and simultaneously they tweeted these out on December 18th, 2020, December 18th, 2020, 2:31 p.m., 2:30 p.m. There's no clash between the Secretary of the Treasury and me. We're simply working to resolve the interagency mechanics of an important executive order. There's no disagreement between Secretary of State Pompeo and me regarding the implementation of the president's executive order. We are coordinating closely on an interagency basis. They're literally saying we are implementing the president's executive order. What executive order is that? I don't know, maybe the one where the first deadline is 45 days from election day and mentions these two positions as these two guys making the recommendation on an interagency basis, which is what they claim to be doing. So they announced that they're implementing the executive order, and a lot of people missed it. The next important date is actually Inauguration Day itself, because a lot of people look at, today's date, they say, well, it's March 6th, and they're pretty sure that Joe Biden's president, and they're pretty sure he's staying for the next 4 years. But what they don't realize is Donald Trump made this executive order 2 years ago. He announced that he expected that he's going to need it. He announced that they're implementing it in December 2018, and then the second date is after Inauguration Day. You can't say that he didn't plan for this. We're just at the second 45-day mark where they have to deliver the information, which kicks off the third date. Within 30 days, now, assets are frozen. And that brings us to March 3rd, 2021. That was just a couple days ago. That was Wednesday this week. And it's Friday night. It's technically Saturday morning. So it was just over 2 days ago. So very clearly, I would say that we're on track for things just going perfectly smooth. And that's all we have to say about this executive order. You're now as well read on that as me, which is not saying much. Kraken timeline. November 15th, 2020, Sidney Powell first tweets out, "What's Kraken?" Let's go look at that tweet. And here it is. She says, "Just the beginning, but an excellent summary of what's Kraken." And she has a link to an article, which we'll briefly look at. She says, hashtag release the Kraken. And she, of course, attaches Donald Trump. I think this is Dan Scavino, Kayleigh McEnany, Lin Wood, General Flynn, and a Lin Wood quote, "Every lie will be revealed." The Kraken once again. So this article she tweeted out is just the beginning, but it's an excellent summary of what's Kraken. So what is in that article? This is just a screenshot. So this is the article of what's Kraken. And I'll just touch on, she says it's related to an executive order. And in that executive order, the Director of National Intelligence prepares a report no later than 45 days after an election. And if you click this executive order, it's the executive order we just went through, 13848 on foreign interference in our elections. So that's all I'll cover in here because I don't want to get in trouble. Yes. So that's all that. Back to our timeline. Now we get to what's honestly probably one of my favorites is November 24th, 2020 is when Sidney Powell directly describes what the Kraken is. So on November 24th, 2020, and I have to be careful with which one of these I use because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube. So Sidney Powell tweets out this article that says Sidney Powell's Kraken is a DoD or Department of Defense cyber warfare program. We are at war. And in this article, it describes the Kraken as being a DoD cyber warfare program that hacks into other computers and tracks activities and then keeps evidence of those activities. And she's claiming that it might have some relevance to the election. And here she is tweeting out that article. That's the article right here that we just looked at. And she said, "Who knew?" And she attaches Donald Trump, Lin Wood, Joseph Flynn. And she seems very confident that the Kraken is the key to their success, is how we're going to phrase it. Back to the timeline. So Sidney Powell on November 24th, 2020, tweets out that very specific description of the Kraken. Now we get to Lin Wood's description of the Kraken, and I'm going to be very careful quoting him because he's been kicked off of every social media platform he joins, basically. He was joking in one of his fireside chats that I think they brought down the entirety of the app Parler because Lin Wood wouldn't leave. I don't have the exact date in January 2021 because I was listening to an interview while I was driving. I think it was maybe one of the fireside chats. I really can't say for certain, but he describes the Kraken as a supercomputer that may or may not have potentially tracked some shenanigans, that may or may not have happened around the time of the presidential election in 2020. And that is as close to a Lin Wood quote as I'm willing to get in this video, because again, I don't want YouTube to get angry. In the final Kraken timeline date would be February 5th, 2021, just last month. Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, this guy's been doing 1 or 2 trips out to the White House, meeting with Donald Trump, discussing the election. Mike Lindell was offering alleged evidence he may or may not have. Anyways, he released a documentary a month ago called Absolute Proof, in which he announces a computer program that bears a striking resemblance to the Kraken. And we are going to take a look at what that looks like. And I have to be more careful with this screenshot than I do with anything else so far. So allegedly, these GPS points here represent computers in the United States. And these specific type of computers might just have something to do with the devices people use to cast their vote for who they want to be president. And then these other GPS points in other countries allegedly represent other computers. And you can see there's lines coming from these other countries. This is also the United States. It's flattened out. There's lines coming from these other countries to, you can see the arrows here and the arrows here. The lines are coming to the United States, almost as if these computers are talking to these computers. And these computers are talking to these computers. And that's all we're going to say about that. So he claims to have this like data dump of information showing IP addresses of the American computers as well as the foreign computers. And I know it's very blurry, and I had to crop off some stuff up top that he was claiming there was things with the election that I'm not allowed to show on YouTube. And that's all I'm going to say about that, is that we've got 3 people close to Donald Trump that all describe the Kraken as being this computer program that might be hacking into other computers and keeping evidence of nefarious actions. You can draw your own conclusions. I just wanted to help inform you on the importance and description of Executive Order 13848, as well as the importance and the description of the Kraken, just in case you had missed either one. If I catch any mistakes, I'll put it in the description down below, and I'll have to do timestamps too, as well as here's my Twitter if you want to follow me on Twitter. I only end up recording these videos once every like 6 weeks or so. I really don't have a lot of time, either very late Friday night or very late Saturday, but I don't know. Feel free to critique me if I made any mistakes, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you.